Hello, what is up, Spiceheads? Welcome back to another great video meetup today, sponsored by Trusted Tech Team. Today, we're going to be talking all about access control. As any IT pro can agree that keeping permissions out of the wrong hands is quintessential to maintaining your sanity. And we'll talk about how to do that in an Office 365, Microsoft 365 environment. For more on this, we have a great panel of experts for y'all today, including an IT pro from the SpiceWorks community, as well as an expert from Trusted Tech Team. So without further ado, let's go ahead and start things off with a round of introductions so you all meet our panel of experts. Coming to us first, it's his first time on the show. We are very excited to have him on representing Towner Communication Systems. Please welcome Mr. Ryan Towner. Ryan, welcome to the show today. How's it going?
I'm well. A little cold where we're at, but you know, that's where I bundle up.
It's 30 degrees in Austin. We're about to get snow for the second time in a year, which is like second time in actually like a month. So fun times and across the nation, not just you guys who are usually used to the cold. But Ryan, thanks for joining us. Do you mind telling us a little bit, spending a couple of minutes to tell us a little about what you do?
Sure. So my name's, in case you didn't hear it, my name's Ryan Towner. I'm the president of Towner Communication Systems. We're located smack dab in the middle of Missouri, about 2.5 hours from Kansas City and St. Louis and Springfield. So yes, I am a Chiefs fan, and I'm still, getting over that. But so I've been in the IT field for about 25 years. And currently, some of the things that my company does, we do a lot of cloud-delivered services and products, telephony being probably the primary one of those, but managed services, so desktop support, routers, switches, anything from the edge of the building all the way in. We do a small company here, but we have a lot of customers located physically here in Missouri, but actually all over the United States, as well as several international customers as well. So looking forward to participating in this today and providing some opinion and input.
Mm-hmm. Great. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Ryan. Looking forward to hearing from you. And I'm pretty sure the Chiefs are going to be fine for the foreseeable future. So I don't think you have much.
I think so.
All right. Our next panelist, our returning guest from Trusted Tech Team, I would please welcome Mr. Chidera Idowu. Chidera, how's it going today?
It's going well. It's going well, Justin. Thank you for the introduction. And as many of you know, Chidera, I'm a Microsoft 365 security expert and solutions architect for Trusted Tech Team. And as I'm sure you probably know as well, Trusted Tech Team, we are a software reseller and a gold Microsoft Cloud Solution Partner headquartered in Irvine, California. And as far as weather goes, it's great, as always.
Sunny and 65.
Yes, it is.
You've probably got shorts on, and I'm about ready to.
I actually do. I actually do have shorts on. Shorts and a tee.
Wonderful. All right. Well, Ryan and I are headed that way as soon as this is over. So
that's right.
Beautiful.
Be sure to meet us at the airport. All right. Well, thanks for. Again, thanks for everyone for joining us today. A couple of housekeeping items before we go any further. Of course, if you do have questions for our panel, please make sure to get them into the Q&A widget down below. Sometimes people put them in chat, which is great. So folks in chat, if you can help us out, if you do see somebody post their questions in Q&A, we'll probably miss it, so redirect them to the Q&A widget instead. Also, make sure we got a lot of good stuff from Trusted Tech Team that can help out your Microsoft 365 management and deployment in that resource list. And wanted to give a special shout out to chat. See a lot of our favorite folks. What's going on? George Soul, hope you've been doing well. And Kip130, hope everyone's having a good time today. Got a note from Dan, says, I know Ryan, hope all is well with you. So hopefully you know who Dan is. And of course, if you do decide to participate in chat, we do ask that you adhere to our community guidelines. because we want to make sure everyone is having a positive and professional time in the show today. And as a special thank you for hanging out with us today, one of y'all is going to be walking away with a $500 Amazon gift card. A lot you can spend on that, whether you're just keeping warm or just treating yourself. So hope you guys, whoever wins it, spends it on something good and let us know what it is. All right, well, let's go ahead and get started into it. So we're talking today about access control. Shadir, I was hoping to start off with you and just kind of level set for everybody. What exactly do we mean by access control, particularly when it comes to a Microsoft 365 environment?
Yeah, absolutely. So although most would agree that the term is fairly self-explanatory, I do agree that it would be a good idea to break it down into its individual parts. Access control can be described as managing which users, applications, and systems can see and make changes to different aspects of your environment. Access control can range from digital tools such as assigning permissions to a file to more rudimentary preventative measures like having a security guard standing in front of a business's entryway and keeping an eye out for suspicious characters. If passwords are the secret code you need to get into a club, and MFA is a driver license you need to present as proof you are who you say you are, access control is the list that the bouncer references to determine if you get to sit at that $40,000 bottle service table or if you'll be relegated to the commoner's quarters. There are access control measures for various parts of Microsoft 365 and Azure, and many of them go hand in hand. There are also many granular access control parameters that can be defined within individual Microsoft 365 solutions, such as SharePoint and Teams, but we'll keep this discussion relatively broad to better serve as an introduction to the topic. Now, throughout today's discourse, we'll be focused on access controls that are meant to help organizations protect their privileged accounts, as these are the accounts that hold the metaphorical keys to the kingdom. As for the matter of why implementing good access control practices is a good idea, we really don't have to look far for compelling reasons. The impact of the recent SolarWinds attack has been felt far and wide in both the private and public sectors of business. Most astonishingly, many government agencies were included in the long list of victims of what has been described as the most sophisticated hack ever witnessed. Attackers compromised Orion, SolarWinds' infrastructure monitoring and management platform, in a supply chain attack, and successfully infected over 18,000 SolarWinds customers around the world. Once infected, bad actors were then able to infiltrate and traverse laterally throughout numerous networks, extracting files, forging security certificates, and getting access to Microsoft 365 credentials. Among the list of recommended defenses to mitigate against attacks like SolarWinds, Microsoft suggests implementing privileged access and identity management in the form of just-in-time access and just enough access. Regularly conducting access reviews for your users and apps, and using sign-in monitoring tools like Defender for identity. We'll be discussing these recommendations in more detail as we continue. The proliferation of password leaks has also made the approach of relying on passwords as a sole form of security to be a rather perilous choice for any organization or even just individual to make. Just a couple of weeks ago, we witnessed the largest leak of user credentials containing over 3.2 billion sets of emails and passwords being shared on a hacking forum. Now, while this was a list composed of previously leaked credentials, it has facilitated the process of conducting credential stuffing attacks, whereby attackers can automate the input of username and password pairs to breach user accounts. Nation-state hackers and private profiteers have forced access control to the forefront of the IT security conversation with sophisticated attacks like SolarWinds, ransomware attacks, and seemingly endless credential leaks. All of this necessitates a comprehensive approach to securing user identities and managing access in your organization.
Great. Thanks, Shadir. And I definitely feel like you seem like a 40K bottle service type of guy back when we were in the club. So
not with shorts and a t-shirt.
Ryan, let's talk to you next. Obviously, when working with in a client situation, that makes it extra complicated. And I know every IT pro swears by the, the least privilege, philosophy. How does that work for you and your clients? How do you guys manage access control at your level when managing kind of multiple clients without being overwhelmed by all of the different intricacies, not just of each client, but of each user at that client?
as we do a lot of smaller entities and smaller businesses, right? We're their security eyes and ears. So we have to, help them understand, in a cloud world, how that relates to them. So it's you have to be able to break down all of these complexities for them, and PIM and access control, as Azure is able to do very well, works for them, because it allows us as a professional to help them, make them as flexible as they can be, as flexible as they would like to be, but then provide them, that security reassurance. So it's really really powerful tool, that us as an IT managed service provider, we're just scratching the surface of some of the things that it can do, but it's really impressive to see it working, and allow you the flexibility to do it, because not every customer is the same, especially in smaller businesses. Everyone does security in their own way, but it gives you the flexibility to do it, whether they want to be very granular in access control, so only giving just-in-time access to a guest, someone that's not a part of their company, for hours, days, whatever. But then you may have someone inside, a power user, or someone a part of their help desk internally, that they're going to need access for a longer period of time, or more, a higher level of access. And then for ourselves, it allows you to grant someone that may be a part of our help desk to a customer for a finite amount of time, and at a level that's appropriate for what they're troubleshooting or what they need to do. So.
Right. Chidera, let's go back to you. Can you talk about some of the tools that are native to Microsoft 365 that can help, manage access control, especially if you were, and how that differs from the traditional standard on-premises Active Directory implementation?
Yeah, definitely. And great question. So with on-prem Active Directory, we have a heavier reliance on defining access based on security groups. Whereas with Azure AD, it makes it easier to uniquely identify individual user access, thereby removing some of the complexities that we typically see arising from group nesting in on-prem AD. Additionally, in an on-prem AD environment, administrators add users to groups, and resource owners are then tasked with giving those groups access to apps and resources. While Azure AD also allows much of the same group membership functions as an on-prem AD, it does so with the added benefit of simplifying group management with features like dynamic groups, which admins can use to trigger automatic group assignments based on a set of attributes. Furthermore, administrative management is defined by a combination of domains, organizational units, and groups in an on-prem AD environment. While Azure AD relies on role-based access control, also known as RBAC, custom roles, and privileged identity management, also known as PIM, which Ryan alluded to earlier. Now, PIM enables just-in-time, time-restricted, and workflow-based access to privileged roles in Azure AD. With the inclusion of conditional access policies, Azure AD allows for more customization of when and where users and other objects can access resources. In short, many of the access control features, like reporting on anomalous behavior and automatic remediation that are enjoyed by Azure AD customers, are locked behind third-party paywalls for an on-prem AD environment. Azure AD is designed from the ground up as an identity solution that leverages security threat intelligence to quickly adapt to changes in the security landscape as it learns from your users' behaviors. Conversely, on-prem AD is a solution that degrades over time and only ever improves through ever-burgeoning administrative and financial burden.
Ryan, let's go back to you. I mean, what would you say are kind of your biggest differences between Microsoft 365 Access Control and on-prem Active Directory?
That's a good question. So one of the largest differences that I can probably speak to is Active Directory has a lot of, it has amazing benefits. It's tried and true. It's been around for a long time. But one of the differences that PIM and PIM and Azure brings is, so it even though Active Directory goes a long way, if it's possible to do this, it takes it to a next level. So it takes it beyond what Active Directory does and amplifies it to a multitude of endpoints to allow just-in-time access. That's a really accurate term. So if you've got an outside sales staff or an outside person that works outside your office, you only want them to have access to what they need for a finite period of time. And Azure makes it really, really easy to do that. You can do a lot of that with Active Directory on premise today, but it is definitely not as easy, I think. I mean, for me, as a person who, I don't have formal training, everything I've learned and everything I know is what I've read, what I've done, what I've been around. So it makes it easy for me as a someone to understand it, to set it up, and then to run with it. Automation's huge. You can do a lot of that with Active Directory, obviously on premise, but Azure takes it to a whole nother level, in my opinion.
Great. Chidera, let's go back to you. Let's talk about some of the more underutilized features in Azure Active Directory. What are some examples of use cases? What are some examples of these features, and what are some use cases where they can come in handy?
Definitely. So as I mentioned earlier, dynamic groups are a way to reduce administrative overhead when it comes to adding and removing users from groups. Despite its convenience, I don't see many organizations using this feature in Azure AD. And interestingly, you can create dynamic groups for users and devices, but a single dynamic group can't include both types of objects. Now, conveniently, Azure AD includes a rule builder in its graphical user interface with which you can create new rules and update existing ones. The rule builder allows a combination of up to 5 expressions, and these expressions could include properties like a user's department, account status, or country. The properties I listed are but a few of the many parameters that can be specified as part of the rule syntax. One of our clients actually uses a dynamic device group to enroll company devices into Autopilot for their Intune managed devices, which greatly helps to simplify that process. Now, Azure AD entitlement management is another sort of niche tool that I think has a lot of value as well. What it does is to automate access request workflows, access assignments, reviews, and expirations with respect to the identity and access lifecycle. Automating these processes relieves administrative strain by delegating administrative tasks to non-administrators in the organization who can then create what are known as access packages. Now, these delegated access package managers, as they would be termed, can then define access requests, access approvers, and access expirations via policies. Access packages are essentially a grouping of resources with the requisite access a user needs for a project or to perform a particular task. Access packages help govern access for an organization's internal users and also external collaborators. So going back to the point that Ryan made about when an organization needs to bring in, outside consultants or an outside sales team, this really simplifies the process by which a external users' access can be continually reviewed and ensure that that individual or that group of individuals only have the level of access that they need to the specific resources that they need to work on. And additionally, access package managers, can determine which connected organizations can request access. Again, when an organization partners with another organization to collaborate on, perhaps they have multiple organizations to collaborate on different projects. Well, the access package manager can determine which of those organizations can work on the specific project. Now, PIM, Privileged Identity Management, provides just-in-time privilege access to Azure AD and Azure resources, along with allowing assignments based on time-bound access to resources using their start and end dates to projects, for instance. PIM also requires approval to activate privileged roles, so you can have a sequence of administrators who need to participate in the approval process, so no one administrator has too much power, so to speak. So it's sort of a balance of power. You can think of it that way. And PIM also enforces multi-factor authentication to activate those roles. So when a request comes through from an administrator for approval, in order to actually complete the approval, another group of administrators must first complete their MFA challenges in order to approve that request. So it adds security fences, you can sort of think of it that way, layers of security, so at each point there is another individual involved in that organization, and they can provide the necessary checks and balances. In addition to that, PIM uses justification to understand why users need activation of a particular role. So when that approval comes through, not only does the request come through as I need access to, let's say a help desk admin role, but you need to also give a reason for why you need that access. So that is cataloged and it can be referenced at a later date through auditing, for instance. And then in addition to that, administrators also get notifications when privileged roles are activated. So that way everyone is in on the loop. And again, it provides that additional check. And then PIM also conducts access reviews to ensure users still need roles. So on a frequent basis, the access that those administrators have or those privileged users have will be continually reviewed by multiple administrators and will need to be approved or preserved for a given duration of time. Let's put it that way. And then lastly, as I alluded to earlier, with PIM, you are able to download audit history for internal and external audits. So that's very useful when it comes to that time of the year.
So yeah, let's talk next about migration. So if you do have an on-premise Active Directory implementation, now you're starting to look into what that would actually look like for Azure AD. What does that process look like, Chidera? What are some of the questions that you need to kind of get answered from the onset before you get started?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So really, the process for migration, or rather, I'll say this. While there's a migration process for Exchange Server, we'll be focusing on the migration of user identities and objects to keep in line with the theme of access control for identities. Now, first and foremost, as Azure AD is a component of Microsoft Azure, you will need an Azure AD tenant firstly, before you can actually conduct the migration and synchronization of identities from your on-prem AD to Azure AD. If you don't already have an Azure AD tenant, you can acquire one for free by starting a Microsoft 365 or an Azure trial subscription. From there, I would recommend preparing your on-prem environment by running what's called the ID Fix tool. ID Fix is one word, which will help to identify errors that could cause problems prior to you conducting the Azure AD sync. or process, I should say. For most organizations, the default settings that are provided in an express installation of the Azure AD Connect client will suffice, but you can make alterations to areas like which objects get synchronized from your on-prem AD to Azure AD, and whether you want to implement seamless single sign-on, for instance. All of these settings can be reconfigured at a later time, so don't panic if you're unsure of what options to select during the initial setup. And most importantly, we do need to supply the username and password for an enterprise admin account to the Azure AD Connect tool in order for it to commence its synchronization. And when I say enterprise admin, we do want to pay particular note to that term, as it is not the same as a domain admin, although the two are often mistaken for each other. So if you encounter an error with your provided credentials, the first thing I would verify is whether the account you're using is a member of the Enterprise Administrators group in your on-prem AD. And with the installation of the Azure AD Connect client completed, the first full synchronization of users, groups, and contacts between our on-prem Active Directory and Azure AD will commence. And it's, I would say, a simpler process than what I just described. So it's pretty seamless at this point, just after Microsoft has worked out all the kinks throughout these years.
Ryan, let's go back to you. Have you guys done any on-prem AD to Azure AD migrations, and is there any advice you can offer?
So we haven't done any personally, simply because a lot of the customers that we have are smaller. So a lot of them don't even have, very few of them, I will say, have on-premise Active Directories. But we've played around with it and sandboxed it quite a bit, because it's something that we think is going to be very beneficial for customers, that to incorporate some of the security features, the PIM, just-in-time access, things like that. Some of those benefits that Azure brings to someone that doesn't have an Active Directory on premise. There's a lot of ways that it brings native security just out of the box that helps make a customer who doesn't have a full-time IT staff, who doesn't have someone in-house that may be, more consciously security aware. It brings those tools, puts them right in their hands, and makes it very easy for them. So we personally haven't done one of those, but we've done a lot of research, done a lot of sandboxing with it, and for the most part, it seems very, very seamless, very straightforward. Anything with Active Directory and Microsoft can be challenging at times, but there's a lot of good Microsoft documentation for it if you if you want to take the time to read it.
Yeah, so Chidera, I know that you prepared a little demo for some of the things that we've been talking about, especially for folks who haven't really had much time to dig into the Admin Center in Microsoft 365. Yeah, do you want to just go ahead and share your screen and walk us through some of the concepts we've been talking about?
Absolutely. Let's take a look here. Okay, perfect. All right, so let's just start from the home screen here. So what I wanted to quickly delve into are some of the differences between administering roles via the Microsoft 365 Admin Center versus doing so through the Azure AD portal, as most are only really familiar with the Admin Center approach, but there are vastly more capabilities that can be leveraged by doing it through the Azure AD portal. So let's quickly dive into that right now. We'll take a look at our list of users here, and hopefully they populate, as I did have an issue loading these users prior to this call. All right, so we've got Adele Vance here, right? She's just one of our standard users, and we can see here her account settings. And if we scroll down, we can see that she has no administrative access. So this means she has no privileged access to our tenant. Now, if you go ahead and click on the Manage Roles section, we have the option to toggle on the Admin Center access, and this will be with respect to the various administrative consoles, the graphical user interfaces that exist within Microsoft 365. So as I'm sure you guys are familiar with, there's the Exchange admin, the global reader, the help desk admin, service support admin, and global admin would, of course, mean you have full control over this tenant. So we want to steer away from applying this setting as much as possible. Now, one interesting to note is that with the new view of the Microsoft 365 Admin Center, more administrative roles have actually been added to this section. And you can expand those roles by clicking on the Show All by category. And you can take a look here at the various categories and the subset of administrative roles that apply to those particular categories. So collaboration would pertain to collaborative platforms like Dynamics 365, Exchange, Teams, SharePoint, and Skype for Business, which is on its way out. So make sure you guys switch over to Teams as soon as possible. We do also have device management administrative roles. So those would apply to things like Intune, mobile device management, and then identity roles as well. So this is, for all intents and purposes, the easy way of administering roles. But because it is easy, it is not comprehensive. So with that said, I would like to then jump into the role administration through the Azure Active Directory portal. Now, in order to get to this section, in order to get to this portal, we do want to go to portal.azure.com. And once here, we'll be taken to the home page for our Azure tenant. Now, as you can see here, I have the Azure Active Directory shortcut, which appears here after you've actually had an opportunity to select it from either this list of favorites, or you can also search for it within the search bar here. Azure Active Directory. And then once in Azure Active Directory, we can go ahead and take a look at our roles as administrators. And then in roles as administrators, we once more have a similarly long list of different administrative roles that we can assign to our users in our tenant. Now, what you can do in addition to actually assigning these roles is to actually edit the role itself. So if you click on Application Administrator as an example, we then are taken to this view and we can click Settings. And in here, you can see all the parameters of that role. So, the settings as far as the maximum duration of activation, any assignments, notifications that will be sent, or rather, to which rolled users will notifications be sent to when this role is assigned to an eligible user. And as I said, we can go ahead and click Edit, and we can modify the duration of time for this role to remain active, and this will play into our privileged identity access management configuration as well. So you can modify that ranging from 30 minutes all the way up to 24 hours. So, the entire day in that case. And what we can also do is on activation, we can require Azure MFA. So this is what I was mentioning earlier about in order to activate a role, administrators would have to complete an MFA challenge. Again, just further securing your front door, and then requiring justification. This is where the individual who is requesting the role assignment will need to, give a quick little write-up on why they need the role and for what duration of time they would like the role. And then require ticket information on activation and requiring approval to activate. So this is where we would need approvers, and we would need to select who those approvers are from our list of users, right? So again, this is just a more granular method of conducting role assignments from within Azure AD. Now, in addition to that, what you can actually do, we'll discard our changes here, is to create your own custom roles. Now, this is really powerful because you could say, hey, I don't like the permissions that I'm defaulted to with the roles that Azure AD has created for me. But I would like to make my own sort of role, right, with different parameters. So you can see here for application administrators, we can set read access. We can say they can, let's see here. We'll just select random things for now. Click next. And now this role that I'll be creating, which I'm sure you're going to determine better than just test, now will have these assignments added to it. And we can go ahead and click create. And now we have this role, which we can once more change the settings on as far as the privileged identity management, time-based access, things of that nature. And we can go ahead and assign it as well once this loads. But in the meantime, let's jump over to another sort of quick demonstration I wanted to show. And this time we'll be taking a look at conditional access policies. And just so we all know how to get there, again, it's in the portal.azure.com console, and we can just search for conditional access within the search bar. And then from here, we can do a few different things. So we can either create a new policy, or we can run what's known as a what-if test. Now, the what-if test will actually show us what would occur if a particular user from our organization were to sign in, and which conditional access policies would apply during their signing sequence. So this is a great form of testing out your policy before seeing any repercussions from it. But in this case, we'll click on New Policy. And we'll just say MFA all users, as that will be the intent of our policy. And then we'll go to users and groups. We can either select all users, or we can select a group of users. And from there, we can select either all guests, directory roles. So again, this will pertain to those administrative or privileged roles that we saw earlier, or individual users and groups can be deposited into this policy. And we can also include particular users and groups as well. But again, we'll say all users. And then for cloud apps, so these would be all the cloud applications that users are able to access after having fulfilled whatever conditions are set forth within this policy. Now, cloud application doesn't necessarily mean only apps that are accessed through a browser. In fact, most applications that are developed these days, even if they're desktop apps, are in a sense cloud apps because they all communicate through the internet. And in this case, we can say all cloud apps, and you'll, of course, get a prompt to not lock yourself out. So this is really suggesting that you make a what's known as a break glass account, meaning in the event that there's some catastrophic failure with the service, or if all administrators lose their method of MFA authentication and they're not able to reset it, you'd want to have at least one account that's not subjected to this policy, so you can go in and make whatever remediative actions need to be made. But we'll leave that as is. We're pretty confident in ourselves. And if you take a look here, you can also set this to report only, this conditional access policy to report only. So this will work similarly to the what-if policy, but it will be in real time. So you'll actually see user sign-in events in the sign-in logs for Azure AD, and you'll see whether this conditional access policy would have been triggered had that user, or when that user signs in. And then we'll go to which conditions we want to set. So we can set this condition, or rather this policy, to apply based on a user's risk factor. So if Azure AD determines that this user's risk factor is high, then it'll trigger whatever controls we require for the user to gain access to our resources, or medium or low, and we can toggle that as we see fit. In this case, though, we will leave that unconfigured, as we're not trying to make a risk-based policy. And for sign-in risk, this will be dependent on the risk that's determined by their sign-in. Now, the difference between the two is that user risk would be based on whether those credentials have been leaked online. If it's discovered on the dark web, Azure AD will make that determination. Sign-in risk will be more so based on, hey, this user signed in from California just an hour ago, and now it is trying to sign in from Dubai an hour later. Obviously, this is a impossible travel event, and hence there is a measure of risk that can be assumed in this case. So that's something that you can set there. And device platforms would be, as you can see, all the devices or any devices that are applicable. So Android, iOS, Windows Phone, if you still have it, Windows and Mac OS. We'll click done. Well, I'm hoping Windows phones will come back. And then for locations, we can specify any location, or rather we will specify any location, but you can also do is to exclude your trusted locations. And your trusted locations would be the IP address, the WAN IP of your organization would be a good example of a possibly trusted location. I would refrain from doing this though, just because it is possible, of course, for bad actors to infiltrate your network. And then if they're signed in from within your network, that of course would be a bad thing. So we'll just say any location, and then the client apps, again, we'll select yes to toggle that on, and we'll keep it set to everything. So browsers, mobile apps, so regardless of what type of application the user is using, we want this conditional access policy to be triggered. And for the device state, we'll toggle that to on. So all device states, which means whether the device is hybrid Azure AD joined, or if the device is simply only Azure AD joined, we still want this policy to trigger. And we'll say yes. And we'll go to grant access. So here's where we make the determination of what we want to occur when all these conditions have been met by a user's sign-in attempt. Well, we want to go ahead and grant them access to our resources, but we only want to do so when they've been challenged by MFA. And it will say require all the selected controls. If we had multiple controls here that were required, we can say require one of these selected controls. So only one of these parameters would need to be fulfilled by the user, but we only care about MFA for this policy. And again, don't lock yourself out. And you can give your consent that I understand my account will be impacted by this policy. And then from there, you can go ahead and create it. I'll create it in report only mode though, just so I don't interrupt this demonstration while that gets triggered. It will say create. And there you have it. Now you have a additional conditional access policy that's been created. And then one other thing I wanted to show that a lot of our users have actually been encountered as of late, just due to recent changes to default settings within Azure AD. And that is the security defaults policy. A lot of our users have complained about this because it's rather unexpected, but the security default policies that have been set forth by Microsoft now actually prompt for MFA automatically. So whether or not you specified it for newly created tenants, Microsoft 365 tenants, that is, there is now, we'll go to properties. There is now this setting, manage security defaults. And this, in most new tenants, will actually be set to yes. So we do get a lot of confused customers who reach out to us saying, well, I never enabled MFA. Why am I getting prompted by MFA? This would be the reason, because again, within the properties section of Azure Active Directory, the security defaults have been enabled, which does trigger MFA requirements for administrators and users. And in addition to that, everyone is subjected to having to provide they're subjected to having to use the Microsoft Authenticator app in order to complete the MFA challenge, rather than being able to select or opt to use their cell phone instead. With that said, though, the application has been confirmed to be more secure, just because it's less likely that a bad actor would be able to spoof that than they would be able to, possibly spoof your number through social engineering tactics and things like that. All right, so we have that, and let me just check the time real quick. I want to keep this short. One last thing I wanted to share real quick is the identity protection section of Azure AD. And again, I will quickly show how to get there. Azure AD, identity protection, and we have the search result here. And this is where a lot of the automation and reporting comes from that I alluded to earlier, where you are shown reports on risky users. So these would be users who are suspected of having, again, some measure of risk to their user accounts. And we can decide what to do with them, whether to dismiss this risk event or confirm that the user has been compromised. In this case, if we were to confirm the user has been compromised, they would be blocked. We can also just manually block them from here as well. And if we had Azure ATP, which is a security tool that integrates with your on-prem Active Directory, we can provide further remediation through that as well. But yeah, this is for the most part how you would go ahead and implement role assignments in Azure AD, how you would apply conditional access policies to those roles or just your users within Azure AD, and also how you would configure those roles to suit your needs. So as far as where does Trusted Tech Team fit into the picture? As a senior systems architect and a Microsoft 365 security engineer, I typically assist customers in implementing and integrating the security tools that are available in Microsoft 365 and Azure. And for registrants of this VMU, we are offering a promotion. If your organization is already consuming Microsoft 365, we will award you a $50 Amazon gift card just to meet with us to see if it will be a good fit for you. There are a few stipulations, but all those details are linked in the sidebar. And if you sign up for a time slot, make sure to mention you have some questions about security so my teammates will know to include me on the call.
All right. Sounds great. All right, let's go ahead and get to some questions while we still have time. This is a good one from Damon. With the ever-expanding feature set of O365, administration has become overwhelming at times. Do you feel that the many settings are solutions looking for problems and the by default config is appropriate for most? If not, what settings do you feel are crucial for admins to look at and change? Let's start with Chidera, and then Brian would love any input you have.
Sure, you got it. So as I mentioned previously, security is a layered approach, or rather good security is a layered approach. So while you can never really have too much security, it is good to determine how much security is applicable to your organization, because the more security you add, the more complexities you'll add. And that's really where Microsoft 365's comprehensive security suite becomes very beneficial because there are so many areas of integration between the different security tools. You are able to more easily see into what exactly your policies are being applied to which users, to which resources, and it gives you almost a single pane of glass. Not quite there, but we're getting there. We'll eventually get to a single pane of glass where you can just, see all of your security controls from a single portal and have the appropriate links to get to any controls that you want to modify. But to answer the question of what security defaults I would recommend applying multi-factor authentication to every single user in your organization. And in addition to that, I would also recommend doing so through the application or the utilization of conditional access policies. Firstly, because it makes administration much easier, as you don't need to apply MFA on a user basis, but rather you can do so through group basis, and also because it gives you the additional granularity to determine when and where users are required to complete the MFA challenge. So again, that would be my recommendation.
Okay. Ryan, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, something that that I would probably add is I think a lot of times what's the most benefit is to get your hands on it. You know, you can sign up for it; doesn't cost you anything. The only thing I will caution is that it takes more time than you may think to go into it and start playing with it. But get your hands in there and play with it, because there are a lot of settings with it. But start small. You know, just multi-factor. You know, a conditional access here or there, and then start, you know, slowly expanding that security fence, if you will. And yeah, I mean, it's you can try it for free for quite some time. I think it allowed you should be allow you enough time to get your hands in there and play with it. So
absolutely. And just to quickly add to that as well, we did develop a roadmap to assist customers in defining sort of a time frame in which to apply different security measures within Microsoft 365, and that is included in the resource bar. So I do think that would also sort of answer part of that question as well, as to, you know, what should be applied and when should it be applied.
All right. Guys, I think we have time for one last question. This one comes from WanoFlow. In an environment where only about 5% of the users are remote, does it make sense to migrate to Azure Active Directory, or does a hybrid approach make more sense? And I guess the big question would be, how much does remote access, like away from the office, is that the benefit of Azure Active Directory? And is that the reason why people would want to go to it? Chidera, we'll start with you, and then again, Ryan.
Definitely. For an organization that is still using on-prem Active Directory, regardless of the number of users that are working remote, I would encourage them to continue using on-prem Active Directory in combination with Azure Active Directory. So that would be a hybrid approach. And the reason I'd recommend that is because while Azure AD does have supply many of the capabilities that can be had with an on-prem Active Directory, and then you also have managed solutions such as Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which takes it a step further in sort of providing one-to-one parity with what would be typically found in an on-prem Active Directory environment. Neither solution are still quite there yet where they can completely supplant an on-prem Active Directory. So I would say a hybrid solution for any organization that's still using on-prem Active Directory would be best. Now, for those organizations who don't have an on-prem Active Directory, it would really be most beneficial to them to just go straight into straight into Azure Active Directory and not even concern themselves with spinning up a server on-prem for hosting the ADDS role. So for that portion of the question, I will continue to use the on-prem Active Directory in conjunction with Azure Active Directory. And as far as for the, you know, at which point would I, or rather, is Azure Active Directory targeted solely towards remote users? No, it's not. It's meant to be utilized whether you are a remote user or if you're working from an office within an organization. There are benefits that can be had regardless of what type of user you are.
Ryan, anything that you would add to that?
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I think that I would probably add to it would be, so if you've already got a local, on-prem, and you've got Office 365, so it is difficult to kind of find where to start incorporating some of those Azure tools to your eyes and ears, if you will. But you're almost in the best position there, in my opinion, because you can start to play with it, get your hands on it without affecting anything that's the day-to-day or production environment. So it gives you a way to have your cake and eat it too, so to speak, because you can start doing little things here and there, getting your hands in on it, and then that kind of expands how you can use it, or how you can start to see ways to use it, because it just enhances, gives you another set of eyes and ears. Start playing with some of the PIM and the identity protection, and just gives you a look. Sees what you may be missing every day, and then whenever you're ready to cross that bridge of connecting the two, that's a bigger step. But then you're in a really good position because you know what to expect on Azure. You've educated yourself. So,
agreed.
All right, y'all. We are out of time, but I did want to thank our guests today, Chidera and Ryan, as well as Trusted Tech for sponsoring today's event. Apologies we couldn't get to all of the many questions, but I'm going to turn these all over to Chidera and team, and hopefully they will get to them and reach back out to you guys after the fact. It's now time to announce the winner of our prize. The winner of our $500 Amazon gift card is going to go to GenLove22. Congratulations, GenLove22. You are our winner. Please send a private message to David S. in the community and let him know where you would like that shipped. And thanks again for everyone for tuning in, asking all these great questions. We hope to see you guys around soon. You can see what all other events we've got coming up by clicking on that orange button down below, or by sticking around until after the presentation ends. But until then, stay safe, stay warm, keep it spicy, and we'll see you all back here next time. So long, everybody.
Definitely. Thanks.